watch you as you drive. Do you know I'm looking? And I can't help but smile. Do you know how much I love you? You put my favorite song on, I put my feet up, and we just sing along. And I can't help but feeling, just loving this moment. Can we stay here forever? I'm loving this moment. Can we stay here together? If I could stop the time, don't you know that I would? 'Cause I'm just loving.
Hi, I'm Ann.
And I'm Jeff.
And this is Postcards from Our Golden Years. We're so happy to see you today, aren't we, Jeff?
We are.
And first, we'd like to welcome our newest subscribers. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You know, there are so many of you who watch our channel and you don't subscribe. And we're just so pleased that the last few times we've made that plea, we've had a bunch of you subscribe. So, thank you in advance. If you haven't figured out how to subscribe, some of you older folks may have to check with your kids or grandkids to let them show you how to subscribe to a YouTube channel. But we make it really easy. Here is a QR code. If you open up your cell phone QR code reader, which most of us have on our cell phones, It's an app that's called a QR code reader. You just point it at this code right here, and suddenly a link will pop up and you click on it, and then it takes you to our channel, and then you just find the word subscribe, and it's that fast and easy.
And as a subscriber, they get updates as new videos come out.
Exactly. Well, there's a little bell, and if you click the bell, that's over by the subscribe area, you can decide if you want to be notified every time we upload a new video or just every now and then. So anyway, we hope that you will join us, subscribe, and let's get on with the topic of today's video.
What is the topic of today's video?
Well, today, Jeff, we are going to talk about a comment that we received very recently. Now, this is probably the most recent comment, and I'm probably not quoting it exactly. But the person sent me a message, and I'm sure you'll know who you are if you watch our videos. And they said, you know, I don't know if you realize this, but there are an awful lot of people who watch your channel, and you keep saying that you guys live in Nice, the south of France, and you're just living on your Social Security checks. You know that most people don't believe that. That's like a lie. People don't believe that. We've been vacationing in Nice. We know how expensive it is to go to Nice. Nobody can live in Nice on their Social Security. So I'm sure I'm not quoting that verbatim.
And to be honest, from our standpoint, we used to live in the United States. And for us, until we got here, we didn't realize how affordable it was to live in France. We were surprised also when we got here just how affordable living in south of France in Nice is.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning, okay? Most of you, just like us, you discover Nice when you're on vacation. And you come here and you stay in hotels and you stay in Airbnbs, and they're expensive. I mean, a hotel room here in town, I think that typically, I don't think we ever stayed in a hotel. We stayed in Airbnbs.
We did.
I think the least expensive Airbnb that we stayed in was probably around 325 euros a night. And we would stay in Airbnbs because they came with a washing machine at least. Some had a dryer, and that way if we were traveling, we didn't have to worry about doing laundry in a laundromat, and we could pack later. So we stayed in these Airbnbs and spent a lot of money. And we did tourist things. We went to the restaurants where all the tourists go. And we spent quite a bit of money on vacation. So all of you people who know that it can be pretty expensive to come to Nice, we did the same thing when we came to Nice. We came here to vacation initially. But started doing the research when we decided that we wanted to move to France because we needed to find some place that we could afford to live. We knew just from being in town and looking in the windows at realtors' windows that we could rent apartments for less on a monthly basis if you had a 1 year or more lease. We could rent apartments for a lot less than we were paying if you added up all those Airbnb nights that we spent money on. So I started doing the research when we went home to the US before we decided Nice was where we were going to definitely live. I started doing the research, typing in on Google apartments for rent, and I realized, wow, you can rent a 1-bedroom apartment, a 2-bedroom apartment, fairly reasonable in the scheme of things. Let's back up a step, okay? Jeff was getting ready to retire. He was going from earning the salary of an award-winning architect to Social Security benefits. There's a huge difference. I'll give you that. Huge difference. I spent over 25 years as a senior human resources director years ago, and then I worked as a consultant doing recruiting. And, I'm proud to say that through most of my career, I was earning a fairly good salary. So when it comes time to apply for Social Security, or when you start thinking about it, when you get close to your 60s, you start thinking, how much money could I collect on Social Security?
And the trick is, the earlier you make a claim, the lower amount you get. So fortunately, you were able to wait all the way until you were 70 to get your maximum benefit.
Right, but on me, I need to step back a little bit. My first husband had passed away. We had been married for a very long time. We had been married for over 25 years when he passed away. And at the time he passed away, we had been divorced for about 10 years. And I discovered that when I turned 60 years old, if I had been married to my ex-husband, I forget whether it was for 10 years or 12 years, but it was irrelevant because we were married a long time, I could collect a widow's benefit through Social Security on his Social Security, not his, first husband's Social Security. And so I had a part-time job at that time, and I was curious, so I went to Social Security. And ladies, you can do this too. I went to Social Security and I said, my ex-husband and I were married for over 25 years. He passed away this year. I heard that there is a widow's benefit and I don't have to have been married to him to collect on that benefit. Is that true? And they said yes. And all they needed was a copy of his death certificate, which I didn't have because he had already remarried and I didn't want to bother his widow asking her for a copy of the death certificate. Social Security said to me, no problem, we'll pull it. I pulled an old income tax return that I just happened to have from my ex-husband. I gave them his Social Security number. They were able to immediately pull up his death certificate. In addition, I had to prove that we had been married and lived together for a long time. And they told me if I could get a copy of mortgage papers that we had both signed, that I could prove that we were married. So I went through old folders that I just happened to have in the house of our last mortgage agreement. I mean, I was shocked that I had it. I brought that. Now, at the appointment, they gave me a list of what documents I was going to need. So I went home and I found these things. I also needed to show them that was the mortgage, and there were some other documents. I don't remember what all of them were because this was like, back when I was, I think I was 59. So, we're talking 11, 12 years now. So anyway, they said to me, yes, you can collect almost the full benefit that your ex-husband would have collected had he lived to full retirement age. And again, I'm not going to give you figures here. So this gave me a decent amount of Social Security, quite frankly, more than a lot of people collect on their own Social Security now. At that point, I was too young to apply for Social Security, my own Social Security. I was only 59. And you have to be 60 to be able to take advantage of this widow's benefit, and you can't be married at the time you make application. So I applied for this, and I then got this widow's benefit that started. Now, when Jeff and I met each other, I was still collecting this widow's benefit, and just because I remarried didn't stop the benefit. I was able to collect that benefit for years. And in the meantime, I kept looking at my Social Security, my own. I would go onto the Social Security website, and I would see if I converted that widow's benefit to my Social Security, would it be more than what I'm getting on my ex-husband's Social Security? And for a while, no, it was better for me to just stay with his. And I checked when I was getting near the youngest retirement age, which would be 62, where you could start collecting Social Security. I checked again when I was 65. Still not enough to make the change. And occasionally Social Security would send me a letter and they would say, hey, just wanted to let you know that if you are ready to convert your widow's benefit to your own Social Security, you could collect this much more each month. But the letter would give me figures like, one time the letter said you could collect $1.28 more. I'm not going to change for $1.28 because once I took my own Social Security, that was it. That was the max I could get on my own Social Security. So I just kept saying, no, let it ride, let it ride, let it ride, as long as that widow's benefit was more than what my own Social Security would net me. So fast forward to...
my retirement.
Well, no, before we get to your retirement, when Jeff and I had gotten married, and at this point we weren't even talking about retirement, I'm collecting my Social Security widow's benefit, he's earning a paycheck. 3 years before we moved, when he starts thinking about retiring, we pulled your Social Security statement to see how much you could collect. Now, at that point, you were 67 years old.
And prior to 67, for every dollar I made in Social Security, I ended up paying some in taxes.
Well, for every two that you earned outside of Social Security. If you had opted to take your Social Security at age 62 and continued working, for every $2 you made, Social Security was going to take $1 back. So we said, forget that.
That's not a good deal.
So when he turned 67, that was considered max retirement age. I'm sorry, that was considered max retirement age. So at that point, that was the first time that he could collect Social Security and continue working and not be penalized.
Tax-wise, yes.
Tax-wise.
Right.
They wouldn't take any money back. So we came up with this plan when we started talking about him retiring, because frankly, we didn't really have any money in the bank.
And my target for retirement was when I hit 70 years old.
Right.
I wanted to retire so that we could travel and enjoy life.
Right. So what we decided was he would start collecting his Social Security at age 67.
Yeah.
And he would bank all of it in a bank, and I think you put it in a money market account.
Right.
That was earning a little bit of interest, but we were never touching the account. And because we had no money in the savings before that, and all we had were some small IRAs, we decided, well, this will become a little nest egg, because he wasn't going to move for 3 years. So we figured he'll have 3 years worth of Social Security banked in that account. That'll be our little nest egg.
And then I was still working, so we still had the income from my paychecks
Right,
for
and-
day-to-day expenses.
Right, so we were living on his paychecks. So at the end of all of that, I decided at age 70, which was where I could get the max amount of Social Security, I would convert my widow's benefit to my own Social Security. And by this time, when I went to the Social Security website to do a little calculation, I realized that I could collect a lot more now by waiting to convert that widow's benefit to my own Social Security. So it was worth it. So
Yes.
I called Social Security and told them that I was ready to convert the widow's benefit to my own Social Security. And it was, I think it was about $1,200 more, the difference between what I was collecting on that widow's benefit and what I was going to collect with Social Security as my own Social Security based on my earnings. And with Social Security, I believe they take your best 5 years
Best
of
5 years.
earnings.
Right.
So because I had had a lucrative career and had, was earning a nice salary, I qualified on my own Social Security for a decent amount monthly benefit that was more than what average people collect on Social Security. So you see, people who say they live here in France on their Social Security, they can be living on any of these amounts of money. I mean, you can collect over $5,000 a month on your Social Security. And that's quite a bit of money. Now, a lot of people don't collect $5,000. And I would say, the average amount is probably in the $2,000 a month range. We happen to be fortunate that we're both collecting quite a bit more than $2,000 a month. So if you take what I collect, which is just a little bit less than what Jeff collects, because after all, he didn't wait until age 70. He started collecting his at 67. So if you add his to what I'm collecting, that's quite a bit of money each month that we're collecting in Social Security. So when we were trying to figure out if we could afford to live in Nice, we took what Jeff collects in Social Security, what I collect in Social Security, and we added them together. Now, if you're a single person, you're only going to have one salary, and your entire budgeting on whether you can afford to live in Nice or anywhere in the south of France, or anywhere in France for that matter, on your Social Security, if you're a single person, it's going to be based on your salary. However, if you're a married couple, you have two salaries. And that's quite a bit of money to live on in Nice, or for the most part, in a lot of France. To some people, Nice is an expensive place to live. It's all relative. It depends on where you came from. For us, we wanted to set ourselves up in a position here in France where either one of us could easily live here independently on just our Social Security to cover our expenses. Because, we're getting up in age. Who knows how many more years we have? So we've intentionally found an apartment where the rent was such that if something happened to one of us, the other one could just continue living in that apartment, pay the utilities, and it wasn't going to be life-changing for either one of us. So when you start thinking about how you can come here and live on just your Social Security, you have to give it a lot of thought. Also, when we were talking earlier, Jeff, before we started shooting this video, you mentioned also about changes.
The changes are the lifestyle change. Living in Europe, we do not need the two-car setup like we used to have in the United States. We had 2 cars, 2 insurance payments. We used to go to the gas station every week. Since we moved to France, I haven't been to a gas station in over a year.
Yeah.
So we use the public transportation, and in Europe, especially in Nice, the public transportation of the trams and the buses get us basically everywhere we want to go. And the other benefit is there's a train station that runs right along the coast. So Ann will wake up on Saturday and say, "Hey, Jeff, let's go to Italy for lunch." And she'll buy a ticket on the train, and we'll be in Ventimiglia or somewhere down the Italian coast having lunch and be back in time for dinner. So it's an adjustment in your lifestyle that you're dependent more on public transportation, less on private. Now, we do live in an apartment that's half the size of what our apartment or our house that we rented in Florida. So you give up a little bit on the size. But what happens is we've got everything we need here.
Well, that's it. Before we moved, we did an awful lot of purging. I mean, we had a lifetime of stuff that we had to go through before we moved here. So we moved here relatively light. Yes, we had 62 boxes if you've watched our video, but I packed those boxes light, and quite frankly, a lot of them were just clothes and shoes and and some miscellaneous household things and treasures that we didn't want to move here without. So we have adjusted to living in half the space that we had in the United States.
And in the United States, we had a 3-bedroom house,
Right.
2-bath with a 2-car garage.
Right.
Now in Nice, we don't need a garage, so we don't have a garage at all. But we've got a 2-bedroom apartment.
Right.
We have 1 bathroom. We always would have liked to have a second bathroom, but as you downsize, you'll find that just by, "Hey, are you done in there?" you can make do with just 1 bathroom.
Exactly. And as you get older, think about it. How much space do you really need? I hate cleaning. I absolutely hate cleaning. And so far, we haven't lucked out and found somebody here in Nice to clean for us. So I didn't want a big place to have to clean. We needed a bedroom for us. We needed a guest room that could be partially guest room, partially home office, partially storage, and we needed a minimum of 1 bathroom.
Right.
So we got the minimum. We needed a living room that was an okay size so that we had room to invite a few more people. But quite frankly, we had a party at Christmas time last year and had around 30 people here in this little living room.
Right.
So we have simply adjusted our lives to living in smaller quarters. I mean, we don't spend the kind of money bringing things into the house. I mean, I would love to buy these other pieces of furniture and tables that we see in stores, and I see them with him, and he goes, "Okay, where are you going to put that?" I mean, we can't fit another piece of furniture in this apartment. Something would have to go, and he's already taken apart and chopped up everything that we could get rid of, or hidden it under things, behind things, or whatever. So a big part of it is you have to downsize your life, and you have to say, okay, I'm going to live in a smaller home.
Right.
I mean, for us, the main selling point for us was that terrace out in the front of our apartment.
Right, because when the weather's nice, we're out there every morning for breakfast.
And it didn't matter to us that our bedroom is, not as big as what we had in the U.S., or that our closets aren't as big as the U.S., or that, unfortunately, we have to share 1 bathroom.
But we've learned to make do.
Exactly.
So one of the other things is in utilities, in Florida, we were all electric with the house. So our electric bills were $300 a month on a budget.
Between $300 and $450 a month, 12 months a year. Because if it wasn't air conditioning, it was heat.
Right. And here in our smaller apartment, being that there's a unit above us and a unit below us and a building beside us, our electric bills are 80 euros.
Well, 88.
88 euros.
Right.
So you can see that we're living in a much reduced utility footprint. And in our rent, our heat and water is included in our rent.
Right. So there's a selling point there. So, we have low rent. I mean, it's not dirt cheap.
And we only have one utility, which is electric. Well, we do have cable because we have internet.
We have cable, we have internet. So these are the things that we gave up when we moved here.
Yes.
We don't need the AAA membership. We don't need the Costco membership. We don't need a car expenses. We don't need to pay somebody to come and mow our lawn like we did in Florida.
That's true.
We didn't need to keep our Medicare Part B or Part D coverage. We dumped them when we left. We have no plans to ever return to the U.S., so we didn't need our Part B coverage. You can't use Medicare here in France. So we no longer had the expenses of a Medicare supplemental plan, a minor thing, but we didn't need any magazine subscriptions either. We used to get a ton of magazines back in the U.S., and they used to stack up really high in the living room. I'd end up throwing them away every few months because we weren't reading them, and it started to look like we were
hoarders.
Hoarders, exactly. So, I mean, if you start thinking about how much you spend on every little thing in the United States, you don't need any of that here in France. All you need to do, I mean, if you're smart like us, we paid off every single credit card that we owed before we moved here. So we moved here debt-free. Our Social Security, one of our Social Security, technically, pays all of the basic living expenses. Basic living expenses include the rent, the utility that we do pay, which is the electric, the internet, the cable, cell phone bills. Then there's groceries, just day-to-day groceries. So these are like basic living expenses. Now, the comment that I had received recently said, you go to these restaurants and you show the 109 euro, I think it was 109 euro restaurant receipt. How can anybody who's just living on their Social Security go to a restaurant, spend 109 euros, and then say, oh, we're going to go to this fancy rooftop place and have dessert? And that was sort of part of the comment.
Yeah.
How can two people living on Social Security do it? I don't believe you're living on your Social Security. Nobody's going to believe that. Well, if only one person technically covers the cost of the rent and the basic living expenses, it makes it very easy because we have the other person's Social Security. And it's not like we draw a line in the bank account. Both of our Social Security checks are deposited automatically as euros into our France bank account. But we have enough coming in that there's enough to cover the basic expenses, and there's always enough to go out to lunch a couple times a week, sometimes more, go out to dinner. That 109 euro dinner bill, I'll be very honest with you, we don't spend that very often. Typically, when we go out, what are our checks? About 50, 60?
50 or 60 euros.
Yeah.
But the rest of the time, we're eating at home.
Right, exactly.
And since we've moved to France, we're sort of combining our meals into one big meal around lunchtime.
Right.
And just some light snacks later in the evening. So we've actually cut back on the amount of food that we eat every day.
Right.
Now, in Florida, we used to get in the car and drive to Publix, and we would buy a bunch of groceries, or we'd go to Costco and buy a bunch of stuff, and we had a freezer in the garage, and we had a refrigerator in the house, and we'd stack all this frozen food in here. The difference in living in France is there's a supermarket across the street from our apartment.
Well, practically. A 5-minute walk at most.
So somebody will say, hey, I need eggs. I go downstairs, I walk across the street, I buy a dozen eggs and bring them back.
I can be in the middle of making coffee and say, hey, could you run and get some eggs? And he can be back before I've got the coffee made with the eggs.
And because Nice is such a walkable city,
Yeah.
I used to spend most of my days driving to Home Depot or Lowe's, and I'd spend milling around in the hardware department.
Well, you do still
Well,
go to Brick-O-Rama on the
here
train.
they're called Brick-O-Ramas, and I walk to the hardware store, and it's a 10-minute walk, and I get what I need, and I pick it up, and I bring it back. And because we're in just a small apartment, there aren't that many big projects to really do.
Right.
So hanging pictures on the wall or doing some tweaks here and there, it's just been so much simpler adjusting to the European lifestyle.
Exactly. So you have to be very smart about how you do it. The most important thing is you have to have enough income on your Social Security and or pensions. Maybe you don't collect a lot of it in your Social Security. Maybe you collect it as a pension. But you have to have enough money coming in, guaranteed money, not including savings, because that you can spend in a day. France wants to know that you have guaranteed money coming in that is at least the minimum wage here in France. That's just to get here. Then they look at where you're moving to and what it might cost to live there. And they determine, based on what other income, or not income, based on what other money you're bringing to the picture, bringing to France, your savings or investments, is that going to support you for the first year of your visa? Will you have enough money either in the guaranteed income, which has to be what satisfies the minimum for the visa, and we have enough to cover your day-to-day living expenses with everything else. So we were very fortunate. Now, we intend to live here for the rest of our lives. We have no plans to ever return to the U.S. The money that he put away in his savings account, that was all from his
Early Social Security.
early Social Security that he started collecting, we've spent a lot of that money just getting settled here, replacing the furniture. We've used some of it to take vacations because that savings account and the money that I had in my savings.
So it did take a little bit of a savings account in order to make the move here to France.
Right, the initial move was not cheap.
Right.
But it wasn't as expensive as it could have been, but totally that came out of our savings account. It didn't come out of our Social Security account.
And in order to save on the move, we purged most of the things that we used to have in the United States. We came with basically clothes, and then we purchased the furniture when we got here to Europe.
Right, so a lot of that came out of our savings.
Yeah.
That fancy bed that goes up and down here in the guest room, that was like, in dollars, US dollars, it was around $7,000, $7,500. That literally came right out of our savings account. So now that we are living here in France, we have to make sure that we're watching our dollars beyond our Social Security, because we know we've got living expenses, basic living expenses covered. We can live comfortably here. We don't sweat out how are we going to pay the rent each month. Never even a thought. I hardly ever look at our bank account. I've got everything programmed to auto pay. So the money comes in from Social Security, automatically goes out. The only thing that we now have to watch for the rest of our lives is keep an eye on our savings account. And we have some money in IRAs, and that's it. So we didn't come here with a lot of money. We are not rich people. We're not poor, but we are not rich people. We came here with whatever we could scrape together in those 3 years before we made the move.
And Anne spent 3 years planning
Yes.
what it would cost, how much the move would be, all of the different things we needed to take care of about our visas and our driver's licenses and all the other things we needed to transfer over to living in Europe.
Right.
So it's a bit of a process, and she's got a lot of videos where you can look back and see some of those steps.
Yeah. And the other thing is, without going into too much detail, I mean, healthcare in France is a lot less expensive. So right now, according to French law, seniors coming from other countries that don't have any taxable income, and if you're coming from the U.S. primarily, I'm talking to you, at the moment you are able to be on the national health care system and you're not charged social charges. I'm sure this is going to change because there is a law that is recently, it's not, the law itself hasn't been finalized, but the proposal to change it has been approved. So I'm sure in the near future, probably in the 2026 tax year, France will come to those of us that are currently here and not being charged for the healthcare system, just to be on the healthcare system. And they'll want us to chip in some money. From what I understand from reading that I've done, France is going to have to negotiate this with Canada and with the United States because there are certain treaties that are in effect, and they're going to see if they can work out some sort of reciprocal agreement where those of us that maybe paid into our Medicare system will get credit for that, and the U.S. government will kick in money to France to cover those of us who have moved here. Nothing is set, nothing is planned. It's all a bunch of proposals, but the bottom line is all of us who came here are just following the law. And so at the moment, there's no vehicle for us to kick in money to the France healthcare system. But I'm sure every single American who has come here for a better life in Nice, everyone that we've talked to, all of our followers, subscribers, nobody came here to take advantage of a healthcare system. So when they send us a bill, we're happy to pay our share. So I don't want any comments about it. I don't even want to get into that. But the fact is that healthcare in general, even if you have no insurance, is a lot less expensive here in France than it was in the United States. So that's another area where we're saving money. If we weren't on the national health care system and didn't have a mutuelle, so we'd be paying out of pocket. I mean, a doctor's appointment is 29 euros, 30 euros for that first appointment, and $25 or 25 euros after that. Pretty inexpensive. So when you take all of those things into consideration, you do spend a lot less living here than we did anyway in the United States. Now, in all fairness, it wasn't hard to beat what we were spending in Naples, Florida, where we came from. It was
an expensive area
it was
of
an expensive,
the United States.
Right. There were a lot of wealthy people who lived here, not us, or lived there. And so it was very expensive to live there. If we went back to the United States, there is no way that Jeff and I could afford to live in the United States the way we live here in France on just our Social Security. He would have to go back to drawing houses, and I would have to, get a part-time job doing something somewhere.
But in France, they look at the Social Security as non-taxable income for American citizens.
At the moment.
Right.
Now,
we do still pay, back to the United States, we still pay income tax to the United States on our Social Security payments. But France, with the tax treaty currently, credits that and does not add any additional tax on top.
Right. And all of this is subject to change.
Right.
But again, we didn't come here for the tax benefit. We didn't come here for the health care. We came here for the joy of life, the beauty of France. We love France. I've loved France since I was I don't know, since before I ever came here as 11-year-old little girl when my dad bought me my first French beret, and I thought just by putting it on I could become French.
And there's a few more steps to becoming French, aren't there?
Exactly. So anyway, I know we've gone on for a bit, and this is actually one of our shorter videos. But we wanted to address this because the comment that I had gotten this week on Instagram, now I had answered that person and she seemed very happy with my response to her. I guess she hadn't thought about the things that I shared with her that we've shared in this video. But she's not the first person who had made comments. I had some other nasty remarks on other videos. I removed those remarks because they just weren't very nice.
But we are
Right.
pleasantly surprised
Right.
at how well we can live here in Nice, France, on the money that we get from Social Security.
Right. And again, maybe we're fortunate because of the amount of Social Security we collect. You know, if you're collecting $900 a month Social Security, you're going to have a problem.
That's going to be hard.
Even if there are two of you, that's only $1,800 a month.
Yeah.
As a couple, the minimum you need to be able to be earning in guaranteed, you know, pensions, Social Security jointly is, I think, around 3,500 euros. So we more than make that. So you have to look at the situation. You have to think about where you're thinking about moving to. Maybe Nice isn't where you can afford to live. Maybe you want to live out in the countryside somewhere where the cost of living is even less expensive, a lot less expensive than Nice.
Right.
But out in the countryside, you're probably going to need to buy a car. So anyway, for those of you who were sitting there, and I'm not saying all of you, it was just a few. For those of you who are sitting there looking at your TV or your computers going, liar, liar, you can't do that. You can't live there on just your Social Security. That's impossible. I've vacationed there. I know what it costs to live in Nice. Well, come to Nice, do a little research. When you live here in Nice, you don't live in tourist areas. You don't go to a lot of tourist restaurants. You go to some occasionally because sometimes that's where the good ones are.
Right.
And you just...
And those are our splurges. We splurge
right.
a lot of times when you see those dinners, we're out like that. Those are our splurge for that month, or for an anniversary or something, we'll do something special.
Exactly. So anyway, that's our video for this week. We appreciate your listening. We hope that we've enlightened a lot of you who either thought that we were lying and it's impossible, or now we've given you some ideas and you realize that, hey, we do collect enough Social Security. You put yours with mine and together, we can afford to live in Nice or somewhere on the south of France.
Yes, we can.
Right?
Right.
Okay. So thanks for watching. Again, if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. Give us a thumbs up so our algorithm starts churning away and moving our video up to the top, showing it to more people, and we can grow our channel. And we look forward to seeing you in the next video. So thanks again. See you next time. Bye for now.
Bye.
I could stop the time. Don't you know